and welcome to this week's review on Dragon Ball Daima. This week I review the episode titled Surprise! And we kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives, all the things I enjoyed about this one, and the headline positives. Once again, the animation and action is brilliant. I love how adventurous this one feels, and I love how strange that it gets. Now, I'm just going to say here and now, we're doing this review slightly differently. I've just got a few light notes. Nothing's really quite as scripted as it usually is. Just going to experiment with the format here, because this is such a strange episode. It's kind of hard to really talk about it in a linear fashion, or something resembling a linear fashion. But we'll see how we go with this. Maybe this will be a new thing, who knows? And we'll kick off by just saying is that, yes, the animation once again was brilliant and well put together, and had a really great extended fight sequence towards the end of the episode. Well, I say towards the end of the episode, it was pretty much the entirety of the second half of this entire episode was just this one long, strange action sequence with Goku and his friends fighting a giant dog and then kind of sort of fighting a giant child. I'm just wondering now exactly how those two creatures now fit into the great ranking of power levels and such. I'm sure that all the fans of that kind of malarkey are now going to be sitting there just going through their notes and saying, how does giant child scale to Majin Buu? But sure, that's fine. My god, this episode is just so bloody weird. Like, I love it. I love the idea of it. I love the concept of it, but we'll get into that shortly. I've just said I'm not going to talk too much about the animation and the action side of things, because there's only so many ways you can say it's brilliant, and I think that it looked great. And this is one of the few episodes we've had recently where there hasn't been some odd element of the editing. Sorry, just my brain went blank for a second there. I thought I was going to call it the deaditing. But anyway, the editing this week has been fine, and we haven't had any major guffs or mess-ups as we've had for the past few weeks. There's been no random fades to black, as I was worried that we would get this week, because this week's episode started once again with a little blurb as to what the Dragon Balls are and who Goku is and his previous adventures. And whilst all that stuff still is well put together, it feels at this point totally redundant, because we're now 13 episodes into this. If people don't know who Goku and his friends are by now, I'm sorry, but it's kind of a bit too late, because we've only got about 7 or so episodes left this particular season, provided of course there isn't anything additional later on, but that's a whole other discussion, a whole other rumour mill. Like I said, I'm not going to lean too much on talking about the animation itself, because I think that at the end of the day, it's self-evidently brilliant. I think the action sequence itself, whilst there is a part of me that feels it might have gone a little bit too long for my liking, I still like how it's all put together, and it is Goku and his friends fighting a giant as best as they can do, and it's all put together well, and they all do all the kind of gags and such you'd expect for all of this, and they won't do it without getting too gratuitous or too silly. It's silly enough, it's fun enough for what it is, and I think that what we have here in the episode itself has a lot of character that really makes up for what is ultimately a premise that we've seen done before in this series with a particular episode with Dragon Ball GT, which it's really not going to help with the comparisons to that particular series, but I think that at the very least this episode did that whole shtick a hell of a lot better. I love just the weird adventurous tone that we get with this one. This does feel like a genuinely more of a connection to that original feel of original Dragon Ball, which I feel has been missing for the past few episodes. We're back into seeing strange things in strange places and having just really odd little adventures in the meantime. I mean, this is an episode where at one point the biggest threat that Goku and his friends had faced was an army of giant hamsters, and then ends up becoming that weird looking dog that for whatever reason sounds like an old drunk. I mean, that's a hell of a creative choice, and whoever decided to cast that particular role, he just sounds like the kind of guy that's gone stumbling out the pub. The rolled out the local Weatherspoons have had one too many, and they're slightly asthmatic, so they sound as though they're going to keel over at any moment. Bold choice, novel choice, but sure, it adds just to more of the weird uncanniness of the, not just the look of the bloody weird thing, but also just the whole scene itself. There is this just strangeness about it. It's strange in a fun way, not strange in a bad way, or strange in just an uncomfortable way. It's just such an odd series of events, and I will admit that this is an episode that didn't go quite the way that I was thinking it to do. I will be honest, and this is something I will touch upon when we get into the negatives, is that with an episode like Surprise, I was expecting that title would be in some way like a hint for what's going to come next, that this particular episode, you'd think that it was going to be about Goku and his friends fighting giants, but in actuality it will be about something else, that that would be a large section of the episode, but then it would pivot into the stuff with Aaron Sue and her weird schemes and her plans, or if not her, then somebody else, and we don't really end up getting that. Oh sure, we get something like that towards the start of this episode with that whole sequence of events. I'm not sure if the tone is... I'm not going to say it's a negative, but the opening quarter, the opening few scenes of this episode just struck me as being rather odd. Like, this episode begins with the whole thing of Goma saying to what's-his-face, oh, we've got to stop Goku and his friends getting here. We need to shut down the Warp Lord. And, oh, no, we can't do that. No one's ever done that before. We are doing it now. And as such, then it leads to that scene where the guy's going down and he has to deactivate Warp Sama. And all the mood of it is just so tense and creepy and strange. He's walking into this really dingy, dark, industrial area. All these strange esoteric symbols are all over the place, these weird glowing lights, and he goes into this room, and just the way that he's drawn, it looks so serious and dark, like this is the moment in the series where it's all about to switch around, and all the fun light and adventure we've had over the past 13 or so weeks is gonna fade away. Then all of a sudden, no, we're into the dark territory, and it's all gonna start getting a little bit Zack Snyder. But and then he goes into the room. He goes into the room to deactivate Warp Sama, and the thing to deactivate him, it just looks like the switch on just some old vacuum cleaner, which might be the joke, I don't know. And then when he switches it off, you get the shot of Warp Sama, and he's just slowly switching off, and you got all the deep dark lightning and stuff behind him, and it becomes so moody and serious. And then you've got the look on the guy's face where it looks like he just committed the world's worst atrocity, even though all he's done is just flick a switch, and it's all put together in such a dark and moody way, and it feels so strange in connection to the rest of the episode. Just the tonal shift of this unspeakable act of evil, at least in the context of this particular world, and then, well, what we then get thereafter is just so strange. I mean, the mood in the opening half of this episode, it's good for what it is. I mean, genuinely, if this was going to be the tone for the rest of the episode, I'd be perfectly fine with that, because I think it sells that tone really well. The design and the presentation of it all, how it pivots from the little bit at the start of the episode where you got King Goma having a bit of a rant and a rage, and then you pivot that from that slightly more cartoony thing into something more serious. I think it does that well, and I don't think there's much of a juxtaposition there or a snap there, but there is a snap there going from what's-his-face to then Goku and his friends fighting giant hamsters. Like, it's just such a strange juxtaposition, just this tonal shift that it's not quite tonal whiplash, but in hindsight it is. Like, this episode starts out in such a dark, sinister and creepy way, particularly with the stuff that you then go from all that stuff to then pivot into the stuff with Aaron Sue in her office, and they've got the Dragon Balls now, and again, it feels as though we're building up something darker and more mysterious, but in the end of the day, it really doesn't end up going there, and the rest of the episode is just wacky, fun stuff. Because when I saw all that stuff at the start of the episode, I was expecting, okay, this is your little teaser, somewhat dark earlier on, and then later on into the episode, we're going to come back to it. After we've had a little bit of fun with Goku and the giant animals, that's when we're going to pivot back into this stuff, and we're going to find out what's really going on here. Or some other thing will come out of the woodwork, and it'll get creepy and strange and odd, but no, that's not what we end up getting. Like, again, in and of itself, that stuff is done impeccably well. It's done amazingly well. It has a great tone and feel to it. The stuff for what we get with Goku and his friends fighting giant animals is well put together and fun for what it is. The little bits of world building and lore that we get with this strange energy source, and how these three different realms all connect with one another. Great stuff. I just think it feels odd to put all these things together, because they don't feel as though they hang together quite as well as they really should do. I mean, they should hang together a lot better, and I still think this episode is still good for what it is, but like I say, to go from deep, dark Zack Snyder, this is the most mysterious thing you've ever seen, and then immediately pivoted into, oh, Goku and his friends are just knocking about and having wacky fun times, just feels so odd. to me, and I don't know if I want to include that as a negative or not, because I think that in and of itself it's done well, and I don't think the juxtaposition between these two things is so stark that it undermines the episode, but yeah, it's an odd thing, and I think that whilst we are starting to pivot into more of a negative tone, maybe now's the time that we pivot into talking about the negatives, the things I didn't like about this episode. And first of all, I just have to say here and now, I can't help but feel that it's a little bit late to have an episode like this. Look, let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to consider this episode to be filler, and I do agree with that to a degree. I do think there's still some good material here in. I don't think it's totally filler, I don't think it's totally padding, but I can certainly say this is an episode that maybe is worth skipping, because there is, at least in this point, not much aside from the little bit of Warp Sama getting switched off that really is amounting to much of anything. Oh sure, the stuff of them fighting the giant is fun, it's great fun for what it is, but it feels odd that we're now having a Dragon Ball Adventure episode after a point where it feels as though we shouldn't be getting into that so much. It feels like from this point on we should be pivoting harder into the big final battle stuff, whatever that is and however that translates itself, because after this we've only got 7 more episodes, so unless the rumours are true and that we're going to get another 10 episode block or something around Easter time which is going to wrap all of this up, I don't know. But for the here and now, it just feels really strange to me that we went from a good 3 or 4 episodes where the whole Dragon Ball Let's Go on an Adventure thing was kind of put to the side to now get back into that, and it comes at a point in the story where it feels like we should be getting into more serious stuff. Like, all the stuff at the start of the episode is where we should be going now. Maybe we don't go quite that hard and that heavy quite so early, but it certainly does feel as though that should be where we are now. We're starting getting into the point of the villains are doing stuff that they would never have done before because they are that desperate to stop our heroes, or this is the moment where the big bad guy starts to play the handle more overtly, but that isn't quite what we get here, because we get more wacky adventures. And whilst I don't think that's going to be the case next week based upon the preview, because it still looks at least like we're now starting to get into the realm of, okay, time for the big final battle, but I don't know, maybe this is more supposed to be a bit of a palate cleanser thing, more like a here's the moment for us all to sit down and enjoy the wackiness and the silliness before things start to get serious from next week onwards, which I do hope is the case now, because we've only got 7 episodes left to do this, and it really does feel as though right now should be the time that we're really getting into the final run thing of it here, because God almighty, how the hell are they going to wrap this up otherwise? I will admit, like I said earlier on the episode, I was expecting a lot more. I was expecting this to just go somewhere that it really didn't, and whilst I can't necessarily hold that against the episode itself, there's still this part of me that can't help but sit here and think, okay, where's the surprise here? Is the surprise purely and simply, oh, the switched off Warp Sama, also look out, giant hamsters? Or is it just giant hamsters, or is it just we've switched off Warp Sama? Because the whole switching off the Warp Sama thing is something that our heroes aren't going to find out about until next week. And the stuff with the giant monsters, again, whilst it's fun, genuinely a lot of fun, and I really did like it, despite the fact that I might be sounding on being a bit terribly negative right now, I still can't help but sit here and think to myself, shouldn't there be more here at this point? Like I say, we're in the final 7 episodes or so of this series, and I still don't have a terribly clear idea as to who the big bad in all of this is really ultimately going to end up being. Oh, sure, it's definitely looking like Aaron Sue, but I think that she's ultimately going to, how do I put this, share the fate of other characters like her. She's going to ultimately share the fate of Babidi and Dr. Giro and similar kind of characters. She's not going to be the big bad, she's going to be the thing that enables and sets off the big bad. But it feels really weird that here we are 7 episodes from the end of the series and we're still not 100% sure as to who that's supposed to be. We're still getting a lot of enigmatic calls and discussions between Gloria and Arinsu and whomever else, but at no point does it genuinely feel like, okay, this is the moment where we now have a clear idea as to what everything is. Because I'm really, at this point, I want us to get into that final act. It feels as though we're desperately overdue getting in, well, actually no. It still feels as though the second act hasn't really got going, let alone the final act, but you get the idea. It feels as though we should be focusing a lot more on just drilling down and getting into the nitty-gritty of this is the final few episodes, and this is the final few steps that we take before everything's wrapped up and resolved in the end. What we do and how we get there exactly, I'm not entirely sure yet, but hopefully from next week onwards, it's going to be focused down into this is the final act, this is the final build-up until that big final confrontation, or this is the final build-up until the... if there's a second series of this, as some people are speculating. To get into the overview, as far as the episode itself is concerned, I did enjoy this one. I think that it's a lot of fun. I think that there's a lot to enjoy about it. It really does feel like a classic Dragon Ball-esque episode, even though they never really did anything quite like this. This was a lot more of a GT kind of thing, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It has a lot of great moments in it, a lot of gags and like things to enjoy, but at the end of the day, there's still this feeling that I have in the back of my head, which is thinking, we should be having a little bit more from this at this particular moment. It isn't really good enough to just have these silly little episodes at this point, when now's the time where we need to start building into this final confrontation. This is a moment which we should be building into. This is the bad guy and this is what they really want, because at the end of the day, like I was just saying, it's still not 100% sure as to who this is going to be, because whilst we do have a cast of villains, none of them feel like the big villain. Majin Ku and Majin Du don't feel especially evil. The only character that feels especially evil is Aransu, and to a lesser extent Glorio, but Glorio, I don't know how much of a villain he's ultimately going to end up being. I know that there's still a bit of debate as to how much of a villain he really is, and with Aransu, like I say, I feel like she's the person that ultimately is going to do the "no, I created you, you can't do this to me, you must obey me" kind of thing before she meets her end. But whom is she meeting her end against? Because Du and Ku just seem like just guys. Like, in the grand scheme of Dragon Ball villains, they feel like the most mundane and normal. One's a little bit kooky and the other one's just kind of just wants a job. He just wants a job. He just, oh, I'll do your shopping for you, and the other one just wants to vibe. And no, neither of them feel especially evil. So yeah, it feels really weird right now. We're only a handful of episodes away from the end of the series, and I'm still not 100% sure who the bad guy's supposed to be, but we'll soon see where all that goes. If all that's said and done, however, it's time for Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. Now, all these comments from the previous video, which was the mid-season review, even though it's nowhere near the middle of the season, but still, we continue on, and we go with Big X1, who says, whilst I don't think I've enjoyed Daima as much as you have, I worry that the final few episodes won't be satisfying given how few there are and how much there seems to be done. I am paraphrasing this slightly because we are running short on time, and I will just say is that thank you for your comment, and I do agree to a degree, especially after this week, because, like I say, we're on into the final 7 episodes. I don't know who the big bad villain of all of this is, and whilst it is fun in isolation, it still feels as though it feels as though this is the midpoint. This genuinely is one of the episodes in the midpoint, and there's another 10 episodes left when there isn't. There should be another 10 or 15 episodes. There isn't. There's only another 7 episodes left, 6 or 7. In practice, more like 6, bearing in mind that you got an episode of wrap-up or so. So, we'll see where it goes. I'm still enjoying what we have thus far, but it feels like it's good in isolation more than, say, a whole entity, but thank you. And our next comment comes from Caramelos da Siberia. Sorry if I mispronounced that name. They say the fighting and animation are amazing, but the story has the same mistakes from GT, transforming characters into kids for no reason, and the exploration situations feel like boring fillers. They stole / broke my ship again, which, yeah, I wonder how they feel after this one, because this episode feels like it embodies all the things that they dislike about it. Like I say, I do enjoy Dragon Ball Daima for what it is, and for my sins, I have gone back and I enjoyed GT a lot more now than I certainly did when it first came out, and I will admit that the whole thing about turning the characters into kids again, I think is... I wasn't quite as against the idea when I first learnt about it, when it was first revealed, but there's still this part of me that can't help but sit here and think is that couldn't you have done this same idea but with other kid characters from the main series? Like, you could have set this after the events of Super, And I'd hate to get into how I would have done it territory, as I think that therein madness lies. But you could easily have done a thing of, oh, some monster, some bad guy turns all the good guys into stone, apart from the handful of kid characters, and now they have to save the day and go into the demon realm and deal with things. And you could have it with Oob and Pan and either Buller or Maron or whomever else, and just go on an adventure from there. And I think it would have worked just as well, if not better, and you still have the lower power levels with which to work with, or something along those lines. It does feel like a bit of a plot contrivance, and I will admit that I really don't like the whole, oh, they stole our ship, they broke our ship bit, which has been done way too much, and the fact that this episode is largely that. Like I said, I enjoyed the episode for what it is, but this episode could easily have just been a thing of, they arrive somewhere to find a Dragon Ball, or just to meet up with someone, oh no, giant monsters, and just go from there. Or something along those lines. Like I said, I enjoyed this episode for what it is, but the means with which to have the adventures are feeling a bit too contrived for my liking, but that's a discussion that I'll probably save for the big final series review, which will probably follow in another 6 weeks or so. Anyway, thank you all for watching, thank you all for listening. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought about this particular episode. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!